we're not getting the job done. And I'm not going to blame myself, I'll be honest. They are not getting the job done. I can understand where Steve Bannon's coming from, and I can understand, to be honest with you, John, I can understand where a lot of people are coming from, because I'm not happy about it, and a lot of people aren't happy about it.
But you're the president. Let's bring in our panel to make sense of this for me. Joining us, MSNBC senior national security analyst Juan Zarate. He previously served as deputy national security advisor to President George W. Bush. Bill Kristol, founder and editor of the Weekly Standard. Donny Deutsch. Megan Murphy, editor of Bloomberg Businessweek. And Jason Johnson, politics editor at TheRoot.com, also joins us from a remote, undisclosed location. Very, very, very nearby. Juan, first, I couldn't even get my thoughts together on the news that the president made, and the slander really against his predecessors to suggest that they didn't call families of the fallen. Bush has written about this, so I don't know why I feel protective, but and obviously it's different. President Bush took the country to war, so it's a totally different thing. But it destroyed him, and he wanted to be destroyed by the grief that he felt for every family who'd made the sacrifice. He went to Walter Reed more times than anyone has account of. He called as soon as a call would be received from him, and it was with every fiber of his being that he sought to deliver comfort. I cannot imagine a scenario where he would have stood up and tried to. Explain this to me.
Yeah, I don't know how you explain it, because this is the most serious and sober of a president's responsibilities. He's put men and women in harm's way. They have fallen on behalf of their country.
And Donald Trump has too. He has ordered and greenlit missions in which people have lost their lives.
No,
so
that's absolutely
he's like
right.
some observer of things that he's not doing. Does he still not understand the job he has?
Well, there is a bit of a disconnect, and that last clip you showed does demonstrate that. At times, the president seems removed from realizing that he's actually the head of state. He is the commander-in-chief. He's ultimately responsible for these actions. The fact that 4 brave men died in Niger on behalf of our country, fighting with our allies, that happened on his watch. He's commander-in-chief. He not only has responsibility to communicate to the families of those fallen soldiers, but also to the country with respect to what they were doing on the ground. And so I'm like you. I'm disappointed. I'm hurt because...
And it's, you know what? Yeah. He owes those 2 presidents an apology before the end of the day. I mean, that is a smear and a slander, the likes of which I haven't heard since, I don't know, maybe yesterday. But it's appalling that he said that.
I think he should give him a call, because we both know that President Bush took this incredibly seriously.
And President Obama.
And we know President Obama would take visits to Dover to welcome back the caskets of fallen soldiers. And so, yeah, it's very hurtful. And again, this is the most serious and sober of topics for an American president. And for him to treat it kind of loosey-goosey this way and in a way that insults prior presidents, I think is irresponsible.
And Donny, it's just, I know we don't diagnose him, but it does certainly put a little bit of steel behind your suspicion that there's something wrong with him.
He has no soul. I have to tell you, Megan was looking at a picture. You have a little daughter, I happen to notice, and we have kids. And I think about this man who's leading our country now, who just in the past week said basically we shouldn't have free speech. The media shouldn't be able to say what they want to say.
Or we'll take away their license.
Take away their license. Who basically went after the mayor of San Juan, who's trying to save her people, and made it, I'm doing a great job, and got in the way of saving probably lives. And then today, basically, instead of saying, no, I haven't called them yet, and I'm going to call them, basically did the reprehensible, disgusting, soulless thing, callous thing of lying that these past presidents hadn't done it. Did we elect the worst person on this planet? No, I mean, like every time you think he can't go lower, I practically want to cry. I want to cry. It's not weak. This is not about politics. And there's something so deeply wrong, evil, soulless about this person that's got his hand on the switch, and there's nothing else to say.
I mean, 2 things about it, I think, that are the saddest things about it, is that this lie will live on. It will be tweeted by the base. It will be that, oh, Obama didn't call, George W. Bush didn't call. He feeds his base lies that they respond to and become myth. He believes his own myth about this happening, and this will get perpetuated.
I'm curious. When that happens at that moment, I think he's purely, soullessly transactional. That he's caught. I haven't called him yet. And his first response always in any kind of corner is to lie and bash out at the other guy. So I think it's literally as
transactional. I think that gives him too much credit for strategy. I think he goes out there a 40-minute impromptu press conference to sort of show how in control he is in the wake of this story. But look, we're talking about soul. John Kelly has some soul searching to do, that's for sure. And looking at what he said, something so reprehensible about the military, about people who have lost their families, as Glenn Thrush says, as a Gold Star father himself, to hear that kind of language come out of the president, a slander, a smear on past presidents, is something that he has got to wake up every morning and look at the mirror and work in this White House and work for this man. And I do question sometimes when he hears language like that, loose talk, call it what you will, a smear on those presidents, and it continues to do that, John.
I mean, when you read the whole quote, I guess we played it, I mean, the whole statement of President Trump, it is appalling. It's all about him. I mean, he could have made a 2 or 3 sentence statement. I've got letters prepared. I will look forward to talking to the families when it's the correct time to do so. You don't have to call them in the first day or two, obviously. And, you know, I want to pay tribute here to all the soldiers, Marines, and others, airmen and sailors who are serving our country. And it's one of the, you know, great honors of my job to be their commander-in-chief, period, right? That's what any normal president would do. President Obama, President Bush, President Clinton. Instead, he goes on, I think I looked quickly, he uses the word I something like 18 times in this about 10-line paragraph where he goes on about how he makes causes very difficult for him. It's all about him. It's all about how difficult it is for him.
Nicolle,
it's not about the sacrifice. It's not about the sacrifice of the. It's not about the sacrifice of the soldiers or about their families. It's all about him.
Well,
Jason.
Yeah, none of this is new. This president never takes responsibility for anything, whether it's policy, whether it's foreign policy, whether it's domestic. He's like a 7-year-old. Whenever he gets caught in a lie, it's like, well, they did it, or they didn't do it, or I didn't know.
7-year-olds have more humanity.
Exactly. They have more responsibility because somebody would eventually step in and hold them accountable, which many of the Republicans in Congress don't seem willing to do at this particular point. Because this goes back to not just the Khan family, but this even goes back to repeal and replace. This goes back to tax reform, where every single time serious questions are asked of this president, his response is, well, nobody knew how difficult this was. That's your job. You can't claim that no one else knows how difficult the job is that you're supposed to be doing. And so I'm not surprised by this. I don't think there is, I don't think we've seen the bottom of what this president is going to be willing to do. If you're willing to sit there and chastise American citizens, 2.3 million who probably still don't have clean water in Puerto Rico, I don't really think there is a basement that he won't be willing to dig into if he thinks it can get him out of taking responsibility.
Nicolle, I want to ask you a question because your old boss, an incredibly elegant man, Barack Obama, an elegant man. When does a point in time come where they stand, obviously they don't want to politicize anything, where they stand up and say, no, we called all those families, and what the president said is a lie and incorrect?
Well,
At what
President
point do they step
Obama's
up?
office did put out a statement saying that President Trump's claim is wrong. President Obama engaged families of the fallen and wounded
No, but I
warriors.
mean actually come out and speak. The two of them actually come out and speak.
I think that both men are probably, I don't speak for President Obama, I don't speak for President Bush anymore. I think both men are sort of at peace with letting their legacy speak for themselves. Right. I think the question is, when are enough of our democratic institutions under enough threat? Either, you know, you had last week Rush Limbaugh worried about Donald Trump overreaching on the NFL. You had both Presidents Bush and Obama worried about the First Amendment and the attacks on the press. Presidents Bush and Obama didn't like the things that were written about them in the Washington Post either. But they understood that a First Amendment is what makes us different. And it's stunning to see. Well, I'm just going to let you watch because you have to see what happened on this. As a result of this president, I won't use the expression again, but a grown-up man had to say to Jake Tapper, the anchor of a Sunday show, this.
You have a cattle ranch. You don't want to say anything about the senator suggesting you've been gelded before the world. That's not anything that bothers you.
I checked. I'm fully intact.
I mean, I guess it's funny, Donnie.
No, it's sad. First of all, that's just not a grown-up. That's a guy who was running a Fortune 5, CEO of a Fortune 5 company in the world. And
let's back explain this story for anyone like me who was at Pumpkin Patches. So we're now 1 week and 1 day into GOP Senator Bob Corker's diagnosis of this White House as an adult daycare facility. He's been a defender of Rex Tillerson. I'm sure you're a fan of Rex Tillerson being part of the national security establishment. Do you agree with Corker's assessment that he's one of the people that stand between President Trump and chaos?
Yeah, I think there's a whole cadre of senior leaders who are part of this, and I think that's right. And I think the problem and challenge with the way the president's handled everything, whether it's Secretary Tillerson or the Attorney General or anybody on his staff is whether or not he's actually supporting them or undercutting them. And the question of what credibility he gives them in their mission as leaders in his cabinet is a fundamental question. And I think, you know, the problem for Secretary Tillerson at this point is the question is as to whether or not he has the faith and confidence of the president, whether or not what he's doing is on behalf of the president or it's something on his own. And now you have to question at every moment whether he's abroad or at home.
Is he on his
who
way
he's
out?
speaking for.
Is Pompeo on his way in to the State Department?
Look, I have no idea what's going on with personnel, but you
Would
hear
you be
them.
surprised? Do you think that that's an option that's been presented to the president?
Well, you've certainly heard that Secretary Tillerson is not there for the long term, right? That he could be gone as soon as January.
His departure isn't imminent, but it's unavoidable. Is that your understanding?
I think that's what I've heard, but you know, who knows?
But his genitalia are okay. We know that. We know that.
Can I just
Let
get
me
back
give Bill
to the
Kristol.
generals? I'm just, it's so upsetting, really. I mean, he has these generals working for him who are doing their best to, I think, save the country from the Trump presidency and advance foreign policy principles and policies they believe in. John Kelly obviously lost his son in Afghanistan. But I know Kelly, General Kelly, he doesn't raise it. He doesn't play that card, so to speak, to get any kind of moral authority. You know, he's very dignified about it, obviously. Jim Mattis, the Secretary of Defense, was fired basically by President Obama in 2013, took early retirement, I guess they say. And I knew him when he was out of office in 2016. We had dinner once in Washington. And I don't remember how it came up, but he was talking about when he left. And I said, so you flew, when did you get to Hoover? He was at the Hoover Institution in Stanford for a while. Did you fly out there or something? He said, no, it took me, I took a little time, and then I got there later. I later found out that General Mattis, when he left command, drove across country, took 2.5 weeks, and visited as many of the parents of Marines who had served under him as he could, who had died. I mean, General Mattis was at CENTCOM. They didn't serve direct. I mean, this is often the case that an officer will visit the parents of the enlisted the soldiers or Marines who served under them. But General Mattis didn't have to do this, obviously. He took 2.5, he drove by himself. He didn't have a driver. He didn't have a military, you know, he was out of the military at this point because he thought it was so important. What does Jim Mattis or John Kelly think about Donald Trump?
I hope he calls them and asks them.
Right.
When we come back, as Robert Mueller's reach extends deeper inside the White House, could the